It started with a laugh, not a friendly laugh, not the kind of laugh that welcomes someone new, the kind of laugh that cuts, the kind of laugh that it tells you before a single word has been spoken exactly where you stand. Derek Simmons leaned back in his chair, threw his head toward the ceiling, and let it rip through the faculty lounge like a gunshot. His buddies, three other junior faculty members who followed him everywhere like pilot fish around a shark, joined in a second later. They didn't even know what they were laughing at yet. They didn't need to. Derek laughed, so they laughed. That was the rule here. Naomi Cross stood in the doorway of the Ridgemont State University faculty lounge, holding a cardboard box full of dry erase markers, graded essays, and the framed picture of her daughter she'd put on every desk she'd occupied for the last 22 years. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, watching them watch her. Derek finally lowered his chin. His eyes traveled from her scuffed work boots up to her pressed button-down, then to the gray streaking her temples. He looked at her the way people look at furniture they didn't order. "Wait," he said, loud enough for this graduate assistant making coffee in the corner to hear. Wait, you're the new hire?" His friends laughed again, softer this time, testing. Naomi said nothing. She shifted the box to her left hip and waited. Derek swiveled in his chair, spreading his arms like he was introducing a headliner. "English department, everybody. This is the big solution to their budget crisis. 30 years of experience, they said. Distinguished career, they said." He squinted at her like she was a math problem he'd already decided was wrong. "You look like you should be mopping the floor in here, not teaching on it." The graduate assistant dropped a spoon. It clattered against the tile, and for half a second that was the only sound in the room. Naomi looked at Derek, really looked. The kind of look that doesn't blink, the kind of look that doesn't need to. "I'm Naomi Cross," she said. Quiet, even. Like she was reading a weather report. "I teach advanced composition and post-war American literature. My office is in 317. If you need anything, my door is open." Then she walked past him. She didn't rush, didn't storm, didn't give him the satisfaction of speed. She walked at the same pace she'd walked into every room she'd ever entered. Recruiting offices in Atlanta, hangar bays in Qatar, 100 different classrooms across 100 different cities where people had looked at her and decided she didn't belong. She was used to that look. But being used to it and tolerating it were two different things. The box hit her new desk at exactly 8:47 on a Tuesday morning. She unpacked methodically. Markers in the top drawer, essays in the second. The framed photo of her daughter, Ruth, went in the exact center of the desk, angled slightly left so the light from the window hit it just right. She stepped back, looked at the room. Bare walls, cinder block painted the color of old teeth, a window that overlooked the loading dock. The previous occupant had left behind a coffee ring in the shape of South America and a trash can full of syllabi from 2019. This was her new beginning. 3 years ago, she'd retired from the Marine Corps after 20 years of service. 20 years of waking up at 04:30, of running faster than the person next to her, of learning that silence was louder than screaming and that the most dangerous person in any room was never the one with the biggest mouth. She had left behind a master sergeant's pension, a chest full of ribbons she never displayed, and a body that ached in weather she couldn't predict anymore. She thought teaching would be quieter. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The first week was fine. Better than fine. Her students showed up, did the reading, asked questions that proved they'd actually opened the book. Naomi fell into the rhythm easily. Lecture, discussion, the quiet satisfaction of watching a 19-year-old connect two ideas they'd never connected before. She liked them. And more importantly, she could read them. 20 years in the Corps taught you how to read people in 3 seconds flat. Who was lying? Who was posturing? Who was dangerous and who was just loud? She'd sat across from generals who couldn't hold eye contact and privates who looked through her like she was made of glass. These kids were easy, except for the ones in the back. There were 4 of them. Juniors, all of them. Football players, all of them. Derek Simmons had made sure she knew that within the first 10 minutes of her first class. "Just so you know, Professor Cross," he'd said, leaning back in his chair with his hands behind his head, "we've got practice at 2. So if you could wrap things up by 1:45, that'd be great." He hadn't asked. He'd told. Naomi had looked at him over the top of her reading glasses. "The syllabus says class ends at 2. I'll see you then." Derek's smile had flickered just for a moment. Then he'd laughed, looked at his friends, and said, "Oh, I like her. She's got jokes." His friends laughed. The rest of the class looked at their desks. Naomi had seen that dynamic before. The alpha, the enforcers, the silent crowd that knew better than to get involved. She had seen it in boot camp, in the fleet, in every organization where hierarchy mattered more than humanity. She'd handled it before. She'd handle it again. But she didn't know yet that this wasn't just about a few entitled athletes and their lazy professor. She didn't know that Derek Simmons wasn't just loud, he was protected. By the athletic department, by the alumni association, by a head coach who'd turned Ridgemont State into a Division II powerhouse, and a university president who'd decided winning was more important than dignity. She didn't know that the 4 young men in her back row had never faced a consequence in their entire academic lives. And she definitely didn't know that one of them, the quiet one, the one who never laughed at Derek's jokes, the one who sat in the corner and took notes like the rest of the class didn't exist, was the son of a man she'd trained 20 years ago on the yellow footprints at Paris Island. That information was sitting in the dark, waiting. And when it finally came out, it wouldn't just end their season, it would end everything. The first crack showed up on day 12. Naomi had assigned a 5-page analysis of James Baldwin's Sonny's Blues. Standard stuff. Close reading, thematic analysis, a thesis that required actual thought. She had given them 2 weeks. She'd offered office hours. She'd even posted a sample outline on the LMS. Derek turned in 3 pages of font-inflated, margin-expanded garbage that didn't mention Baldwin once. Instead, he'd written about the 2019 football season and how adversity builds character. He'd spelled adversity wrong. Naomi graded it like she graded everything. Fairly, thoroughly. With comments in red ink that demanded better. 62% D-, failing. She handed it back on a Thursday afternoon. Derek looked at the grade, looked at her, then did something that told her everything she needed to know about who he really was. He smiled. Not an angry smile, not a frustrated smile. The smile of someone who'd already decided that your rules didn't apply to him. 62, he said, loud enough for the whole class to hear. Wow, I don't think I've ever gotten a grade that low. Someone in the back, one of his friends, the one named Scott, snorted. Naomi didn't look up from her podium. There's a first time for everything, Mr. Simmons. Derek's smile didn't waver. No, I mean I've literally never gotten a grade this low. My other professors, they usually appreciate my perspective. Maybe it's a generational thing. The room went quiet. The other students, the ones who weren't part of Derek's orbit, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew what was happening. They just didn't know if they should watch or pretend they couldn't hear. Naomi closed the book she'd been reading from. Slowly, deliberately. The sound of the spine settling echoed off the cinder block walls. Mr. Simmons, if you'd like to discuss your grade, my office hours are posted on the syllabus. But we're in the middle of class, and I have 17 other students who actually did the assignment. So, unless you have a question about James Baldwin, I'd suggest you save your comments for later. Derek held her gaze for a long moment, long enough for the silence to turn heavy, long enough for the girl in the front row to start chewing her pen cap like it was keeping her alive. Then he leaned back, spread his arms across the empty desks on either side of him, and smiled again. No questions about Baldwin, he said. I'm good. He wasn't good. And they both knew it. But Naomi let it go. For now. 'Cause that's what you do in a classroom. You redirect, you refocus, you refuse to let one student steal attention from the 17 who showed up to learn. She thought that was the end of it. It wasn't even the beginning. The next day she found a note on her desk. Not an email, not a message left with the department secretary. A physical note, handwritten on a piece of notebook paper left directly on top of her keyboard so she couldn't miss it. It said, "Stick to teaching, Grandma. Football pays for this school, not you." Naomi read it twice. Then she folded it carefully, slipped it into her desk drawer, and taught her 10 o'clock like nothing had happened. But she noticed things now. Things she'd been trained to notice. Derek and his friends, Scott, Reed, and a 4th young man named Marcus who seemed smarter than the rest but too scared to show it, had started sitting in the very back row, the row closest to the door, the row that let them leave first and arrive last. They talked during her lectures, not loud enough to be obvious, just loud enough to be disruptive. A whisper here, a snicker there, the kind of noise that made the serious students turn around, glare for a moment, then turn back with their shoulders hunched. They were testing her, seeing how far they could push before she pushed back. Naomi had seen this before too. It was called probing. You send out small signals, you watch for a reaction. If the target flinches, you escalate. If they don't, you escalate anyway. The only way to win was to never let them see the effect they were having. So she didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice, didn't change her lesson plans, didn't give them the satisfaction of special attention. She taught like they weren't there, and for 2 weeks that worked. Then Derek figured out a new game. It started with a question, innocent enough if you didn't know what he was doing. "Professor Cross," he said, raising his hand like a student who actually cared, "I was wondering, where'd you teach before this?" Naomi paused. She had been in the middle of explaining narrative voice in Toni Morrison. The question had nothing to do with the lesson. "Community college," she said, "in North Carolina." Derek nodded slowly, his face arranged in an expression of fake curiosity. "Community college. Interesting. And before that?" "High school." "High school?" He turned to Scott, raised his eyebrows. "So you've never taught at a university before?" "I have a master's degree and 22 years of classroom experience, Mr. Simmons. The level of the institution doesn't change the fundamentals of good writing." Derek smiled. That same smile. The one that said he was enjoying himself. "No, I get that. I'm just saying, it's different here. To the expectations, the students, stakes." He gestured around the room like he was showing off a penthouse apartment. "This is a Division II program. Some of these guys are going to play on Sundays. So when we're in here, we're not just representing ourselves, we're representing the whole university." Naomi set down her chalk, brushed the dust from her hands, and looked at Derek Simmons with the same expression she'd used on a 19-year-old private who just asked if "sir" was really necessary. "Mr. Simmons, I don't care if you're going to play on the moon. In this classroom, you're a student, and students do the reading, write the papers, and earn their grades. Is there anything else you'd like to clarify before we return to Toni Morrison?" The class held its breath. Derek smile didn't drop, but something behind his eyes changed, hardened. He was used to winning these exchanges, used to professors who laughed along, who let things slide, who told themselves that keeping the athletes happy was part of the job. Naomi wasn't those professors. "Nope," he said finally. Toni Morrison. Got it." He picked up his phone and started scrolling. Didn't look at her for the rest of the period. Naomi considered that a win. She didn't know that Derek was just getting started. The department chair, a soft man named Dr. Hendricks, who'd been at Ridgemont since the Clinton administration, called Naomi into his office on a Monday afternoon. He closed the door, offered her a seat, took a long breath before he spoke. "Naomi," he said, folding his hands on his desk, "I've gotten some feedback about your classroom management." Naomi sat perfectly still. "What kind of feedback?" "Derek Simmons stopped by. He feels like you're not taking his concerns seriously. That you're, how did he put it? Dismissive of the student-athlete experience." Naomi waited. Dr. Hendricks shifted in his chair. "I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying he's a big part of this campus. The athletic department values him. The alumni office values him. And when a student like that raises concerns, I have to at least listen." "What concerns did he raise?" Hendricks pulled up an email on his computer, scrolled, cleared his throat. "He says you've been condescending in class, that you singled him out in front of his peers, that you made him feel," and this is a quote, "like his voice doesn't matter because he's an athlete." Naomi let the words sit in the air for a moment. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out the folded note Derek had left on her desk, and placed it in front of Hendricks. "I found this on my keyboard last week." Hendricks picked it up, read it. His face went through a journey, surprise, discomfort, then something that looked almost like exhaustion. "Naomi, I'm sorry this happened. That's not acceptable. But you have to understand, Derek is under a lot of pressure. The team is expected to make a playoff run this year. Coach Morrison runs a tight ship. Sometimes that pressure comes out in counterproductive ways." Naomi looked at him. Really looked. 20 years in the Corps, she'd watched officers throw enlisted soldiers under the bus to save their own careers. She'd watched good leaders get broken by bad systems. She'd watched people choose convenience over courage every single day. Dr. Hendricks was choosing convenience. "Are you asking me to change my grading standards, or are you asking me to tolerate harassment?" Hendricks blinked. "I'm not asking you to do either. I'm just asking you to be strategic. Pick your battles. Derek Simmons will be gone in 18 months. You'll be here for years. Sometimes it's better to let small things slide." Naomi stood up, picked up the note, folded it carefully, and put it back in her bag. "I don't let small things slide, Dr. Hendricks. That's how small things become big things." She walked out before he could respond. The campaign escalated after that. Derek didn't just whisper in class anymore. He held court. He'd come in 5 minutes late, drop his bag on a desk with a loud thud, and announce to no one in particular that practice had been brutal and he was exhausted, and could someone please tell him why they had to read another dead author. His friends laughed. The rest of the class looked away. Naomi taught through it. But now she was documenting. Every late arrival, every disruption, every time Derek spoke over her or dismissed a peer's comment with a wave of his hand. She had a notebook, a small black moleskin. She wrote down dates, times, specific quotes, the same way she'd logged equipment shortages in Kandahar, the same way she'd documented supply chain failures in Okinawa. Paperwork was power. She'd learned that in the Corps. The person with the best documentation always won, but Derek didn't know about the notebook. All he saw was a quiet woman who didn't fight back, and in his experience, quiet meant weak. So he pushed harder. It started with the attendance policy. Ridgemont had a strict rule. 3 unexcused absences and a student could be withdrawn from the course. Derek had missed 4 classes, not because he was sick, because he had trainings. Naomi submitted the withdrawal form. 20 minutes later, her phone rang. Coach Morrison, head football coach, 4-time conference champion, the most powerful person on campus who didn't have a PhD. "Professor Cross," he said, his voice a low rumble that was clearly practiced. "I understand you're trying to drop Derek Simmons from your class." "I'm not trying to do anything, Coach. He missed 4 classes. The policy is clear." Morrison paused. "Derek is my starting quarterback. He's the face of this program. If he's not eligible to play, we lose our season. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Naomi understood perfectly. She had heard this exact conversation before, just with different titles. "My soldier needs to deploy. Can't you just sign off on the medical waiver?" "My officer needs this promotion. Can't you just lose the paperwork?" "I understand what you're telling me, Coach. The policy still applies." Morrison's voice dropped lower. "Let me rephrase. Derek Simmons will not be withdrawn from your class. I'll make sure he attends every session moving forward. But if you try to make him ineligible, I will go to the provost. I will go to the president, and I will make sure your contract isn't renewed next year. Do we understand each other?" Naomi said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll expect Derek in class on Tuesday." She hung up, and she did not withdraw him, because she'd already learned something important. The policy wasn't the policy. The rules weren't the rules. There was a separate system at Ridgemont State, a system for athletes, a system for winners, a system for people who mattered. And according to that system, she did not matter at all. The humiliation went public 3 days later. Ridgemont had a weekly faculty meeting, every Thursday at 3 o'clock. Dr. Hendricks ran it like a funeral, quiet, procedural, everyone too tired to speak out of turn. Naomi sat in the back. She always sat in the back, old habit. Derek wasn't at the meeting, of course. But his influence was. One of his friends, Reed, the biggest one, the one who looked like he had been designed by a focus group for college athlete, had filed a formal complaint against Naomi with the Student Affairs Office. She found out when Dr. Hendricks read the complaint aloud. The student alleges that Professor Cross has created a hostile learning environment by publicly ridiculing student athletes, making disparaging comments about their intelligence, and refusing to accommodate their legitimate athletic schedules. The room went still. 15 professors, most of them tenured, most of them too old to care about football, all of them suddenly very interested in their own shoes. Naomi raised her hand. "Yes, Naomi?" Dr. Hendricks looked like he would rather be anywhere else. "Who filed the complaint?" "Reed Thompson, Jr., defensive end. And what evidence did he provide?" Hendricks shuffled his papers. He provided his testimony and the testimony of 3 other student witnesses. Derek Simmons, Scott Porter, Marcus Webb. Hendricks didn't confirm. He didn't have to. Everyone in the room already knew. Naomi stood up, walked to the front of the room, and turned to face her colleagues. "Over the last 6 weeks, I have documented 23 instances of disruptive behavior from Derek Simmons and his associates. I have a note on my desk that says, quote, 'Football pays for this school, not you.' I have been publicly mocked in my own classroom, and when I attempted to enforce the attendance policy, the head football coach called me and threatened my job." She looked around the room, met every pair of eyes. "Does anyone here have anything to say about that?" Silence. One professor, a woman in her 60s named Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, opened her mouth like she wanted to speak. Then she looked at Dr. Hendricks. Then she looked at the door. Then she closed her mouth and stared at her hands. Naomi waited 10 full seconds. Then she sat back down. The meeting continued. They discussed the spring course schedule. They discussed a new general education requirement. They discussed parking permits and budget cuts and everything except what had just happened. Naomi didn't say another word. But she was watching. She was always watching. And she was learning something important about Ridgemont State University. The professors were cowards. The administration was compromised. The athletic department ran everything. And Derek Simmons and his friends knew it. That was the worst part. They knew. They knew that no one would stop them. They knew that the system was built to protect them. They knew that Naomi could document every single transgression, file every single complaint, follow every single policy, and it wouldn't matter, because at the end of the day, football was king, and the king did not apologize. The breaking point came on a Friday, not for Naomi, for the rest of the class. Derek had crossed a line. Not the line Naomi had drawn. He'd crossed that weeks ago. A new line. A line that made the quiet students in the front row finally look at each other like something had to change. It happened during a peer review session. Naomi had paired students up to read each other's drafts. Derek was paired with a soft-spoken young woman named Emily, who wore thick glasses and never raised her hand. Emily handed Derek her paper. He looked at it for approximately 4 seconds. Then he laughed. "Did you actually write this?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This reads like a middle schooler wrote it." Emily's face went red. "I worked really hard on that." "Work harder." He dropped the paper on her desk, leaned back in his chair, and pulled out his phone. The peer review was over. He was done. Naomi saw Emily's chin tremble, saw her push her glasses up her nose, saw her pick up her paper and hold it against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her together. And Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in years. Cold. Not angry, not frustrated. Cold. The kind of cold that came before action. The kind of cold that she had felt in Fallujah, in Ramadi, in every moment where hesitation meant death. She walked to Derek's desk, stood over him, waited for him to look up. He didn't. "Mr. Simmons, put your phone away. I'm texting my mom. Put your phone away or I'll take it." Derek looked up then, smiled. "You can't take my phone. That's theft. Ridgemont's Student Conduct Code explicitly prohibits electronic device use during instructional time without the professor's permission. You don't have my permission. Put it away or I'm writing a referral." The smile stayed, but his eyes narrowed. He was calculating, trying to figure out if she was bluffing. She wasn't. "Fine," he said, shoving the phone into his pocket. "Whatever." He didn't participate for the rest of the period, but he also didn't disrupt. Small victory. Naomi walked Emily to the door after class. "Your paper is good," she said quietly. "He's threatened by you. That's why he's cruel." Emily nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Naomi watched her walk down the hall, small and hunched and carrying a paper she'd probably rewrite from scratch because a football player told her it wasn't good enough. And Naomi made a decision. She wasn't going to let this go. She wasn't going to let Derek Simmons win. She wasn't going to let the system grind her down like it had ground down everyone else. She was going to fight. But not the way Derek expected. Derek expected shouting. He expected emails. He expected her to go to the administration and get ignored. Naomi wasn't going to do any of that. She was going to build a case. A perfect case. A case so airtight that even the football-boosting, check-cutting, winning-at-all-costs administration couldn't ignore it. She was going to document everything, record everything, catalog every incident, every witness, every moment of humiliation. And then she was going to drop it on Derek Simmons like a bomb. She just needed one more piece of information that would make the whole thing unstoppable. She didn't know that piece was already sitting in her classroom every Tuesday and Thursday. A young man named Caleb Taylor, Derek's teammate, Derek's friend, and the son of a Marine she'd trained 20 years ago on the yellow footprints at Paris Island. That information was still buried, still waiting, but it wouldn't stay buried forever, and when it came out, Derek Simmons would learn something his father had never taught him. Never corner someone who knows where the exits are. Caleb Taylor was the quietest student in Naomi's class. He sat in the back corner, the seat closest to the window, and he never spoke unless she called on him directly. When he did speak, his answers were thoughtful, measured, the kind of answers that came from someone who'd actually done the reading. Naomi noticed him the first week, noticed that he didn't laugh at Derek's jokes, noticed that when Derek whispered during lectures, Caleb kept his eyes on the board, noticed that when Derek mocked Emily's paper, Caleb had looked down at his desk like he was trying to disappear. She had assumed he was just shy, or scared, or trying to survive the social dynamics of being a backup player on a team dominated by louder personalities. She wasn't wrong. But she wasn't entirely right either. Caleb Taylor wasn't just quiet because he was shy. He was quiet because his father had raised him to be quiet. His father, who'd served 20 years in the Marine Corps and then another 10 as a high school football coach. His father, who'd taught him that loud didn't mean strong and that the most dangerous person in any room was the one who didn't need to prove anything. His father, who still woke up at 04:30 every morning and ran 3 miles before breakfast and folded his towels in thirds, because that was the only way towels should be folded. Caleb had grown up in that house. The house where discipline wasn't a punishment. It was a lifestyle. The house where excuses were for people who'd already given up. The house where the word respect meant something different than it did to Derek Simmons. Derek thought respect meant fear. Caleb had been taught that respect meant recognition. Seeing someone clearly, understanding their value, treating them like they mattered regardless of their job title or their jersey number. That was why Caleb couldn't laugh at Derek's jokes anymore. He'd tried in the beginning. The first week of class, when Derek had made that comment about Naomi looking like she should be mopping floors, Caleb had forced a smile, had even let out a small laugh just to fit in. But something had stopped him. Something in the way Naomi had looked at Derek. Not with anger, not with hurt. With something Caleb recognized. She looked like his father, not physically. His father was a 6'3" black man with hands the size of dinner plates and a voice that could stop a room from across a parking lot. Naomi was smaller, quieter. Her presence was different, but the energy was the same, the stillness, the control, the absolute refusal to be rattled by someone who clearly wanted to rattle her. Caleb had seen that stillness before. He had seen it when his father stood on the sidelines of his Pop Warner games, arms crossed, saying nothing while other parents screamed at referees. He'd seen it when his father sat across from a principal who wanted to expel him for a fight he didn't start. He'd seen it when his father walked into a room full of football recruiters who'd already decided he wasn't big enough, fast enough, good enough. That stillness wasn't weakness, it was patience. The patience of someone who knew that the loudest person in the room was usually the most insecure. The patience of someone who was waiting for the right moment to move. Caleb had learned to recognize that stillness because he'd been trying to learn it his whole life, and he saw it in Naomi Cross. He just didn't know why. Not yet. Week 7, midterms. Naomi handed back the first major essay of the semester, and the results were exactly what she'd expected. The students who had done the work passed. The students who hadn't, didn't. Derek Simmons got a 54% F. He didn't laugh this time. He didn't smile. He looked at the grade, looked at Naomi, and something dark passed across his face. "This is bull," he said. The classroom went silent. Naomi looked up from her podium. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. This is bull. I worked on this paper for 3 days. The paper you submitted had no thesis statement, no textual evidence, and a conclusion that directly contradicted your introduction. That's not 3 days of work, Mr. Simmons. That's 3 hours. Derek stood up. His chair scraped against the floor with a sound that made the girl in the front row flinch. "You've had it out for me since day one. You know that? You think you're better than us because you were not from here. Because you didn't go to a real school. Because you're—" He stopped. Everyone knew what he was about to say. Everyone heard the word that didn't quite come out. Naomi didn't move. Didn't blink. "I'm what, Mr. Simmons?" Derek's jaw tightened. He was smart enough, just barely, not to finish the sentence. "Forget it." He grabbed his bag, shoved his paper inside, and walked out. The door slammed behind him. Scott and Reed looked at each other. Then they looked at Naomi. Then they looked at the door, and slowly, one by one, they followed Derek out. Marcus stayed. For a moment, it looked like he might say something. Then he shook his head, gathered his things, and walked out without looking back. The rest of the class sat in stunned silence. Naomi took a breath, adjusted her glasses, and said, "Page 142, let's talk about Beloved's relationship with the past." She taught for the remaining 20 minutes like nothing had happened, but Caleb was watching, and he saw something the others didn't see. He saw Naomi's hands. They were shaking, just a little, just for a moment. Then she pressed them flat against the podium, and the shaking stopped. She wasn't made of stone, she was just better at hiding it than most people. And that, more than anything else, made Caleb think about his father. He texted him that night. "Dad, quick question." The response came in 37 seconds. Caleb's father never took more than a minute to respond to anything. "Shoot. Do you know a woman named Naomi Cross? She's a professor here. Used to be in the Marines." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Where did you hear that name?" "Like I said, she's my English professor. She's really good. But there's some guys on the team giving her a hard time, and I don't know. There's something about her, the way she holds herself. It reminds me of you." A long pause this time. Almost 2 minutes. Then, "Call me." Caleb called. His father answered on the first ring. "Son, listen to me very carefully. Naomi Cross, Master Sergeant Cross. She was a drill instructor at Paris Island when I went through. She's the reason I made it." Caleb felt his chest go tight. "What do you mean?" I mean, I showed up to basic training 140 pounds soaking wet, scared of my own shadow, and she took one look at me and decided I wasn't going to quit. She ran me into the ground, made me cry, made me want to go home every single day for 13 weeks, and then she made me a Marine. His father's voice cracked. Just a little. Just enough for Caleb to hear. She saved my life, son. I was headed nowhere. No discipline, no direction, no future. And she didn't just teach me how to be a soldier. She taught me how to be a pal. Whatever she needs, you help her. You understand me? Whatever she needs. Caleb sat on his bed, staring at the wall. She doesn't even know who I am, he said. Then you tell her. What? Next time you see her, you stand up, you look her in the eye, and you tell her, Caleb Taylor, son of Marcus Taylor, Paris Island, 2004, 3rd Battalion Lima Company. She'll remember. Caleb wanted to argue. Wanted to say that was weird, that was awkward, that was the kind of thing that got you made fun of in the locker room. But he didn't. Because his father had never asked him for anything. Not once in 20 years. And if he was asking for this, it mattered. I'll tell her, Caleb said. Good. And son? Yeah? Don't let those boys push her around. She's worth 10 of them, and so are you. Caleb hung up. Sat in the dark for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and started writing an email he never thought he'd write. Professor Cross, my name is Caleb Taylor. I'm in your Tuesday-Thursday class. I don't know if you remember my father... He stopped, deleted it, started over. Master Sergeant Cross, I don't know if you remember my father... Deleted it again. Finally he wrote, Professor Cross, can we talk after class on Tuesday? It's important. He hit send before he could change his mind. Tuesday came. Caleb walked into class 15 minutes early. That was unusual. He usually arrived exactly on time. Not a second before. But today he wanted to catch Naomi before the room filled up. She was at her podium, organizing papers the same way she did every day. Methodical, efficient, like every motion had a purpose. Caleb walked to the front of the room, stood in front of her desk, waited. Naomi looked up. Her eyes were tired. There were dark circles beneath them that hadn't been there a few weeks ago. Mr. Taylor, you're early. Yes, ma'am. She tilted her head. Something flickered across her face. Recognition of something. Not him. She didn't know him yet. But the way he'd said ma'am, the way he stood. Shoulders back, chin level, hands at his sides. You were in the military, she said. No, ma'am, my father was. Marcus Taylor, Paris Island, 3rd Battalion Lima Company, 2004. Naomi went perfectly still. The way she'd gone still when Derek called her grandma. The way she'd gone still when Hendricks read the complaint. The way she'd gone still 100 times before in 100 different rooms every time something important happened. Marcus Taylor, she said slowly. 5'10", 142 pounds. Couldn't do a single pull-up on day one. Caleb felt tears prick his eyes. He didn't know why. He barely knew this woman. That's him, he said. Naomi nodded. Her jaw was tight. He made it, endured the crucible, earned his eagle, globe, and anchor. He talks about you all the time, ma'am. You're the reason he... Don't, Naomi said. Her voice was quiet, sharp. Don't give me credit for what he did. He showed up, he did the work, I just pointed the way. Caleb nodded, swallowed. They're giving you a hard time, he said. Derek and the others. Naomi looked at him, really looked. The way she'd looked at Derek that first day, the way she'd looked at Dr. Hendricks, the way she looked at everyone who tried to figure out how much she could take. I can handle Derek Simmons, she said. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. Something softened in her face, just for a second. Then it was gone. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I appreciate that. Caleb wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that he'd been documenting everything too, that he'd been taking notes, writing down dates and times and quotes the same way she had, that he'd been watching Derek Simmons treat people like garbage for 3 years and he was tired of being silent. But the door opened and students started filing in, and the moment passed. Caleb walked back to his seat, sat down, pulled out his notebook, and wrote, Tuesday, told her about Dad. She remembered, she's going to fight back, I'm going to help. He didn't know how, not yet, but he knew something Derek didn't know. He knew who Naomi Cross really was, and when Derek found out, it was going to destroy him. The next 2 weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Derek stopped disrupting class, stopped whispering, stopped showing up late. He came in, sat down, stared at the front of the room with an expression of barely concealed contempt, and said absolutely nothing. His friends followed his lead. Scott stared at his laptop. Reed stared out the window. Marcus stared at his desk. The rest of the class relaxed. Emily started raising her hand again. The girl in the front row stopped chewing her pen cap. The atmosphere in the room shifted from hostile to merely uncomfortable. Naomi knew better than to trust it. Silence wasn't surrender. Silence was strategy. Derek Simmons wasn't the kind of person who backed down. He was the kind of person who regrouped. She was right. The campaign hadn't ended. It had just gone underground. The first sign came in the form of an email, not to Naomi. About Naomi. Someone, she never found out who, sent an anonymous message to the entire English department. The subject line read, "Is this really who we want teaching our students?" The body of the email contained a single link. The link led to a video. The video was taken from the back of Naomi's classroom, shot on a phone, clearly without her knowledge or consent. It showed her explaining the difference between tone and mood. She was standing at the podium, using her hands to emphasize a point, and the person filming had zoomed in on her face. The caption beneath the video read, "This is how our new professor talks to student athletes. Ridgemont deserves better." The video had been edited, spliced, cut to make her look angry when she wasn't, condescending when she wasn't, aggressive when she wasn't. But no one watching would know that. All they'd see was an older woman, gray streaking her hair, pointing her finger and looking like she hated everyone in the room. Dr. Hendricks called Naomi into his office the next morning. "Have you seen this?" He turned his laptop toward her. The video was already playing. She watched herself lecture for 30 seconds, then reached over and closed the screen. "I've seen it." Hendricks leaned back in his chair, ran a hand over his balding head. "This is bad, Naomi. This is really bad. The athletic director called me last night. The president's office called me this morning. They want to know why one of their professors is bullying their student athletes." Naomi's voice was perfectly even. "I'm not bullying anyone. The video is edited. It's misleading. And whoever filmed it violated university policy by recording without consent." "I know that. You know that. But the court of public opinion doesn't care about policy." Hendricks sighed. "Look, I'm going to give you some advice I probably should have given you weeks ago." Naomi waited. "Apologize publicly. Say you're sorry for any miscommunication. Say you're committed to supporting all students, especially student athletes. Say the right things and this blows over." "And if I don't?" Hendricks looked at her like she'd asked if gravity was optional. "Then I can't protect you." Naomi stood up, picked up her bag, walked to the door. "I haven't done anything wrong, Dr. Hendricks. I'm not apologizing for doing my job." She walked out, and she didn't look back. That night she sat in her apartment, bare walls, second-hand couch, a kitchen that smelled like yesterday's coffee, and stared at the video on her phone. She'd watched it 17 times. She'd analyzed every cut, every edit, every moment where her face had been frozen and stretched to make her look angrier than she was. The person who made this knew what they were doing. This wasn't a sloppy hatchet job. This was professional-grade character assassination. Derek Simmons didn't have the technical skill to make something like this. Neither did Scott or Reed or Marcus, which meant someone was helping them. Someone with access to editing software, someone with a grudge, or someone who'd been paid. Naomi set down her phone, walked to the window, looked out at the parking lot, the loading dock, the dark shape of the football stadium looming against the night sky. She'd been in tougher spots. Fallujah, 2006. A convoy ambush, her vehicle disabled, a small arms fire from 3 directions. She'd been a staff sergeant then, responsible for 12 Marines who looked at her like she had all the answers. She hadn't had the answers. She'd had training, discipline, the ability to stay calm when everyone around her was panicking. She'd gotten them out, every single one. She would get out of this too, but she needed help. She thought about Caleb, about the way he'd stood in front of her desk, shoulders back, chin level, hands at his sides, about the way he'd said ma'am like it meant something, about the way he'd looked at her when he said, "You shouldn't have to." She pulled out her phone, opened her email. "Mr. Taylor, thank you for telling me about your father. He was one of the best, I mean that. And I want you to know, I see what you're doing, the notes you're eyeing, the way you watch. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know, I see it. Stay safe, stay smart, and don't let them change who you are. Professor Cross." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she went to bed. She didn't sleep. The next morning, Naomi walked into her classroom and found her desk covered in printed copies of the video. Someone had printed screenshots, her face frozen in unflattering angles, and taped them to every surface. The podium, the whiteboard, the backs of the chairs. The word "resign" was written on the whiteboard in red marker. Large letters. Aggressive. Naomi stood in the doorway, looked at the destruction. Then she walked to her desk, calmly pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures. She took 43 pictures, every angle, every screenshot, every instance of the word resign. Then she sat down, pulled out her notebook, and added a new entry. October 17th. Classroom vandalized overnight. Evidence documented. No witnesses identified. She taught her 9 o'clock class in that room. Didn't mention the vandalism, didn't ask who did it. She just wiped the whiteboard clean, pulled the screenshots off the chairs, and taught. Her students were quiet, nervous. They looked at the walls, looked at each other, looked at Naomi like they were waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. She taught. But after class, Emily stayed behind. Professor Cross? Naomi looked up from her bag. Yes, Emily? Emily twisted her hands together. Her glasses were smudged. I just wanted to say, I know what they're doing. Derek and his friends. I know it's not your fault. Naomi felt something warm spread through her chest. Thank you, Emily. I'm sorry I didn't say anything earlier. I was scared. You don't have to apologize for being scared. Fear is a signal. It tells you something matters. Emily nodded, sniffed. I'll say something next time, I promise. She left before Naomi could respond. Naomi stood in the empty classroom for a long moment. Then she packed her bag and walked to her next class. The war had entered a new phase. And for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Not for Naomi, for Caleb. He'd been watching Derek Simmons for 3 years. Watched him bully underclassmen. Watched him disrespect professors. Watched him treat the world like it owed him something. But Caleb had never seen him do what he did on that Thursday afternoon. It happened after practice. The team was in the locker room, everyone tired and sweaty and ready to go home. Caleb was at his locker pulling off his shoulder pads when Derek walked in with his phone held up in front of him. Yo, check this out, Derek said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I found something hilarious. He turned his phone around. On the screen was a photo of Naomi. Not a candid shot, a screenshot from the video, zoomed in and frozen at the worst possible angle. Her face was twisted mid-sentence, her eyes half closed, her mouth open in an expression that looked almost monstrous. Scott laughed. Reed laughed. A few other guys, the ones who followed Derek like puppies, laughed too. Derek, come on, Caleb said. His voice was quiet, quieter than he intended. Derek turned to him, raised an eyebrow. Come on, what? It's funny. It's not funny. She's our professor. She's a joke, Derek turned back to the room. This is what we're dealing with, fellas. A bitter old woman who couldn't cut it anywhere else, so she came here to ruin our season. And you know what? She's not going to win, because we're not going to let her. The guys cheered. Some of them. The ones who'd been drinking Derek's Kool-Aid for years. Caleb stood up, walked toward Derek, stopped a few feet away. Delete the photo. Derek's smile flickered. Or what? Caleb didn't answer. He just stood there, shoulders back, chin level, hands at his sinas, the same way Naomi stood, the same way his father stood. Derek looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. But the laugh was different. Thinner, less confident. Whatever, man. You're weird lately. You know that? He walked away, didn't delete the photo. Caleb stood there for a long time. His fists were clenched. His jaw was tight. He wanted to hit something. Hit someone. Wanted to make Derek Simmons feel what it felt like to be on the receiving end for once. But he didn't. Because that wasn't what his father taught him. And that wasn't what Naomi taught him. Strength wasn't about hitting back. Strength was about staying in control when every instinct told you to lash out. He pulled out his phone, opened his messages. Dad, it's getting worse. His father's response came in 45 seconds. Tell me everything. Caleb told him. Every detail, every humiliation, every moment of the campaign Derek and his friends had been running against Naomi. When he finished, there was a long pause. Then his father said, I'm coming up there. Dad, you don't have to... Saturday. I'll be there Saturday. Don't tell anyone. Especially not Master Sergeant Cross. I want to surprise her. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Relief, fear, hope. Okay, he said. Okay, son, stay strong. Help her however you can. And remember... I know, Dad. Quiet doesn't mean weak. You learned something after all. Caleb smiled, just a little. Then he went back to his locker, finished changing, and walked out of the locker room without looking at Derek Simmons. But Derek was watching him, and for the first time there was something uncertain in his eyes. Saturday came too fast and too slow at the same time. Caleb picked his father up from the bus station at 11 o'clock a.m. Marcus Taylor looked exactly the same as he always looked. Solid, steady, like a tree that had been standing in the same spot for 100 years. He was wearing jeans, a button-down shirt, and a baseball cap with the Marine Corps emblem on the front. "Son," he said, pulling Caleb into a hug that lasted 3 seconds and conveyed everything that needed to be conveyed. "Dad?" They walked to Caleb's car in silence. That was normal. The Taylor men didn't need to fill silence with words. "Where is she?" Marcus asked once they were on the road. "Probably in her office. She's there most Saturdays, grading papers." "Take me there." Caleb hesitated. "Dad, maybe we should—" "Son, take me to her." Caleb took him. The English department building was empty on Saturdays. The halls were quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale green glow that made the building feel like a hospital. Caleb led his father to room 317. The door was half open. He could see Naomi inside, sitting at her desk, reading what looked like a stack of essays. She had her reading glasses on, her hair was pulled back, she looked tired. Caleb knocked. Naomi looked up. Her eyes went to Caleb first, then to his father, and then, for the first time since Caleb had known her, something cracked. Marcus stepped into the room, removed his baseball cap, stood at attention. "Master Sergeant Cross," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. Naomi stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking, the same way they'd shaken in the classroom, the day Derek walked out. "Private Taylor," she said. "You made it." "You told me I would." Naomi walked around her desk, stopped in front of him, looked him up and down the way she'd looked at him 20 years ago when he was a 142 pounds of scared kid who couldn't do a single pull-up. "You grew," she said. "You gave me room." And then Caleb had never seen this before, not once in his entire life. His father started to cry. Not sobs, not loud, just tears running silently down his face while he stood at attention like the Marine she'd made him. "I owe you everything," Marcus said. "Everything I am, everything I built, my son, my career, my life, you gave me all of it." Naomi shook her head. "I gave you nothing. You earned it. You showed me the way." Caleb stood in the doorway, watching two of the strongest people he'd ever met cry in front of each other, and he understood something he'd never understood before. Strength wasn't about never breaking. Strength was about breaking in private, about choosing who got to see you crack. Naomi cleared her throat, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, stepped back. "Caleb tells me you're having some trouble," Marcus said. His voice was rough but steady again. "With some athletes." Naomi looked at Caleb. He braced himself for anger, for reproach. Instead, she sighed. "I didn't ask him to get involved." "He's a tailor. We get involved whether we're asked or not." Naomi almost smiled. Almost. "Derek Simmons and his friends have made it their personal mission to run me out of this department. They have disrupted my class, vandalized my classroom, and edited a video of me to make me look like a monster. The administration won't do anything about it because football pays the bills." Marcus listened. Didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just listened. When she finished, he said, "What do you need?" Naomi looked at him, then at Caleb, then back at Marcus. "Right now, I need to grade these essays, but on Monday, I might need backup." "You'll have it." Marcus stepped forward, extended his hand. Naomi took it. They shook for a long moment, two Marines, 2 decades apart, bound by something deeper than friendship. Caleb watched, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something that felt almost like hope. Monday arrived like a storm front. Caleb could feel it in the air the moment he walked onto campus. People were tense, quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. He went to class early. Naomi was already there, standing at her podium, wearing the same pressed button-down she always wore. She looked calmer than she had on Saturday, more centered. "Mr. Taylor," she said as he walked in. "Professor Cross." He took his seat, pulled out his notebook, waited. The rest of the class filed in slowly. Emily came in with her head down. The girl in the front row sat with her arms crossed. Everyone looked nervous, everyone except Derek Simmons. Derek walked in at 9:14, 4 minutes late. He was smiling. That same smile. The one that said he owned everything he could see. Scott and Reed followed behind him like shadows. Marcus, the fourth member of their group, was conspicuously absent. Naomi didn't acknowledge Derek's lateness, didn't mention the video, didn't mention the vandalism. She just opened her book and started teaching. The first 20 minutes were normal, tense but normal. Derek sat in the back, arms crossed, smiling at nothing. Scott tapped his pencil against his desk. Reed stared at the ceiling. Then, At 9:36, Derek raised his hand. Naomi paused. Yes, Mr. Simmons? I have a question about the course material. Something in his tone told her this wasn't about the course material. Go ahead. Derek leaned forward, spread his arms across his desk. I'm just wondering, how long do you think you're going to last here? The room went cold. Naomi didn't blink. I'm sorry? I mean, let's be real. You're not fitting in. The students don't like you. The faculty doesn't support you. The administration's clearly done with you. So I'm just asking, how long until you pack up that cardboard box and head back to whatever community college you crawled out of? Emily made a sound, a small, scared sound. Naomi set down her chalk, brushed the dust from her hands. Mr. Simmons, if you have a question about James Baldwin or Toni Morrison or the proper use of the semicolon, I'm happy to answer it. If you want to continue this line of questioning, we can do it in Dr. Hendricks' office. Your choice. Derek stood up, slowly, deliberately. No, I think we're going to do it here, in front of everyone. Because everyone deserves to know what kind of person's standing at the front of this room. He walked toward the podium. Scott and Reed stood up too, flanking him like bodyguards. Caleb's hand tightened around his pen. Here's what I know about you, Professor Cross, Derek said, stopping a few feet from her desk. You're a failure. That's why you're here. You couldn't cut it in the real world, so you came to a place where you thought no one would challenge you. But you picked the wrong school, you picked the wrong team, and you definitely picked the wrong quarterback. Naomi said nothing, just stood there, watching. I heard about your background, Derek continued. The military, very impressive. But this isn't the military, this is college football. And in college football, we protect our own. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to pass me in this class. You're going to pass Scott. You're going to pass Reed. And then you're going to forget this conversation ever happened. Or I'm going to make sure you never teach again. The room was silent. So silent that Caleb could hear the ventilation system humming in the walls. Naomi looked at Derek, really looked. The way she'd looked at him on the first day. The way she'd looked at him every day since. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, placed it on the podium. I've been recording this conversation, Mr. Simmons. Derek's smile flickered. You've been recording every interaction in this classroom for the past 3 weeks. Every disruption, every threat, every time you or your friends crossed a line. I have 47 hours of audio documentation. I have photographs of the vandalism in this room. I have emails from your coach threatening my job. I have a paper trail that goes all the way back to day one. She paused. Let the words sink in. Scott Porter has been filming me without my consent, which is a violation of university policy and state law. Reed Thompson has been intimidating other students into silence. I have witness statements from 8 different students who are willing to testify. And you, Mr. Simmons, have just threatened me in front of an entire classroom of witnesses. Derek's face was pale now. His smile was gone. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice was different, higher, less certain. Naomi tilted her head. Am I? She looked past him toward the door. You can come in now. The door opened. Dr. Hendricks walked in, followed by the university provost, followed by the head of campus security, and behind them, Caleb's heart stopped, his father, Marcus Taylor, standing in the doorway like a wall of concrete. What is this? Derek demanded. What is happening? Dr. Hendricks stepped forward. His face was gray. Derek, I need you to come with me. I'm not going anywhere. I didn't do anything wrong. You threatened a faculty member. In front of witnesses. We have it on tape. Tape? What tape? Naomi held up her phone. This tape. Derek looked at the phone, looked at Naomi, looked at the collection of administrators standing in the doorway, and for the first time in his life he realized he wasn't going to win. This is crazy, he said. You're all crazy. My dad is going to hear about this. My lawyer... Your lawyer can speak to the university's legal counsel, the provost said. Her voice was ice. Right now you're going to the security office. We have some questions for you. Scott and Reed were backing away now, trying to disappear into the crowd of students. You too as well, the provost said. Don't move. Caleb watched as Derek Simmons, the quarterback, the king, the untouchable, was led out of the classroom. His shoulders were slumped, his face was white, he looked small, smaller than Caleb had ever seen him. The door closed behind them. The room was silent. Naomi stood at the podium, her hands were shaking again. But this time she didn't hide them. Class dismissed, she said quietly. No class Wednesday. I'll see you Friday. No one moved. I said class dismissed. Slowly the students gathered their things. Emily walked past Naomi and squeezed her arm. The girl in the front row nodded at her. One by one they filed out. until only Caleb and Marcus remained. Caleb walked to the front of the room, stood in front of Naomi. "You okay?" he asked. Naomi looked at him. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Then she straightened her shoulders. "I will be." Marcus stepped forward, put his hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Master Sergeant Cross," he said. "Thank you for trusting my son." Naomi looked at Caleb. "He didn't give me a choice. He was already documenting everything. I just gave him a reason to keep going." Caleb felt his face get warm. Marcus laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came from deep in his chest. "That's my boy." The three of them stood there for a moment, in the quiet, in the aftermath. And somewhere outside a siren started to wail. It wasn't over, but the battle had shifted. The fallout was spectacular. Derek Simmons was expelled. Not suspended, expelled. The university had no choice. The audio recordings alone were enough to destroy him. Combined with the vandalism, the video, the threats, and the testimony of 8 students who'd finally found the courage to speak, the case was airtight. Scott and Reed were suspended for the remainder of the semester. They would be allowed to return next fall on academic probation with mandatory behavioral counseling and a permanent mark on their records. Marcus Webb, the 4th member of the group, was never mentioned in the official report. He'd cooperated with investigators, provided his own documentation, and received immunity in exchange for his testimony. He transferred to a different university the following spring. Coach Morrison was forced to issue a public apology. His contract was not renewed at the end of the season. The athletic director resigned. The president of the university held a press conference in which he promised systemic changes to the way student-athletes were supervised and disciplined. Dr. Hendricks retired early. He didn't attend the faculty party at the end of the semester. Naomi stayed. She taught her classes, graded her papers, watched her students grow. Emily became a confident writer. The girl in the front row stopped chewing her pen caps. Caleb became one of her best students, not because he was trying to impress her, but because he'd finally found something worth working for. She didn't gloat, didn't celebrate, didn't do interviews or write op-eds or tell her story to anyone who would listen. She just taught. But something had changed. The faculty treated her differently now. With respect, with caution, with a nervous awareness that the quiet woman in 317 was not someone to be underestimated. The students treated her differently, too. They didn't just show up to her class. They listened. They asked questions. They stayed after to talk about books and life and the future. And every Tuesday and Thursday, Caleb Taylor sat in the back corner, took notes, and smiled to himself, because he knew something the rest of them didn't know. He knew who Naomi Cross really was. Not a victim, not a survivor, not a hero, a Marine. And Marines don't quit, they don't break, and they never ever forget who they are. The semester ended. Grades were submitted. Commencement came and went. On the last day of classes, Naomi found an envelope on her desk. No return address, just her name, written in careful handwriting. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Old, worn at the edges. The kind of photograph that had been carried in a wallet for 20 years. It showed a young man in Marine Corps dress blues, standing at attention, smiling like he just climbed a mountain. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, Marcus Taylor, Paris Island, 2004, never quit. Below that, in newer ink, thank you for teaching me how to stand. Naomi held the photograph for a long time. Then she placed it on her desk, right next to the picture of her daughter, and she taught her last class of the semester. There are moments in life when the universe hands you a choice. You can be silent. Or you can speak, you can watch, or you can act, you can let the bullies win, or you can stand up and show them exactly who you are. Naomi Cross chose to stand. Not because she was brave, not because she was strong, because she knew something Derek Simmons didn't know. She knew that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. That silence isn't weakness. That patience isn't passivity. And that sometimes the person you're trying to break is the one who's been building strength their whole life. Derek Simmons thought he was untouchable. He thought football would protect him. He thought his father's money and his coach's influence would keep him safe. He was wrong, because he didn't know who he was dealing with. He didn't know that the quiet woman in the press button-down had survived things he couldn't imagine, had led troops through fire, had built young men into soldiers, had spent 20 years learning exactly how to handle people like him. He didn't know that her silence wasn't fear, it was patience. The patience of someone who knew that the truth would come out eventually, that the house of cards would fall, that the loudest voices always burn out. And he definitely didn't know that one of his own teammates was watching, taking notes, waiting for the right moment to help. Caleb Taylor didn't speak up at first. He was scared. He was young. He didn't want to lose his friends or his place on the team. but he learned. He watched Naomi stand, he watched her refuse to break, and he realized that silence wasn't safety, it was complicity. When he finally spoke, when he finally stood next to her, everything changed. The question isn't whether you'll face bullies. You will. The question is what you'll do when they come for you. Will you fight back? Will you document? Will you build a case so airtight that no amount of privilege or power can save them? Or will you shrink? Will you apologize? Will you let them win? Naomi Cross chose to fight. Not with anger, not with violence, with patience, with documentation, with the quiet certainty that the truth is stronger than any lie. That's a lesson every single one of us needs to learn, because the Derek Simmonses of the world are everywhere. In schools, in offices, in neighborhoods, on social media, they're loud, they're cruel, they're convinced that no one can touch them, but they can be touched. They can be stopped, they can be brought down, not by someone louder, by someone smarter, someone more patient, someone who refuses to play their game, someone like Naomi Cross, someone like you if you choose to be. The question is, will you? Will you stand up when it matters? Will you document when everyone else is silent? Will you be the quiet person in the corner who refuses to break? Or will you let them win because they're counting on your silence? They're counting on your fear. They're counting on you to believe that you don't matter. But you do matter. You've always mattered. And it's time to show them exactly who you are. Subscribe if you believe that quiet strength can move mountains. Subscribe if you're done being silent. Subscribe if you're ready to stand, because the world needs more people like Naomi Cross. And maybe, just maybe, you're one of them.